Welcome. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Jennifer Harris. Many of you know me in my past life as the library director here at the Plymouth Public Library. I am happily retired and off doing other fun things, including being the president of America's Hometown Laureates, which is a nonprofit organization where we promote poetry programming around the Plymouth community. So I seem to have fallen into the perfect activity to keep me busy and out of trouble. As many of you see, we have a lot of things going on during our Plymouth Poetry Festival, which was yesterday and today, and next Tuesday and Thursday. I have handouts at the back. I would like to take a moment to thank the local scene who is video recording today. They have been doing a magnificent job. They edit it, and then you'll start to see this on YouTube and other places. So this is being recorded for posterity's sake. So on a personal note, I will say that Irish, the Celtic harp and Irish poetry is near to me, even though I am not Irish. Lee Regan, I don't know if many of you remember her, who was the head of our reference department, my beloved, and a great loss. But today, I know that she would be thrilled to know that we're having this event. She is the one who brought us together with Anya. So just remember, I feel like there's a lot of spirits with me today, and this is part of it. So thank you. Let's see, anyone else I have to thank? No? We're ready for the show? Okay. So I am going to now introduce Anya Minogue, our internationally renowned Celtic harpist.
Deep peace of running wave to you, deep peace of the flowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth to you, deep peace of the shining stars to you, deep peace of the watching shepherds to you, deep peace of love to you. So we're going to cover lots of poetry from 500 BC up to the present day, and we're going to do it all in an hour. And a little bit. So just to let you know, it's like, well, what have I got to do with poetry? So the harping tradition in Ireland is very closely related to the poetry tradition, because the harpers and the bards who kept the history, the genealogy, and wrote the poetry, the harpers and the bards were very closely related, and they had to train for 7 years. And the harping and the poetic tradition, the bardic tradition, go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And all the sort of houses and chiefs in the big houses had a harper and had a bard, and they also had what's called a brehon, or a brehon, because law, or brehon law, was also a tradition that you had to train in for 7 years. So poetry has been a huge part of Irish tradition going back for centuries, and it's very closely related to the harp. And the harper and the bard were often the same person. The only thing was, it was an oral tradition, but it was part of the sort of aristocratic music and tradition and poetry. They kept the genealogies, they wrote about the wars, they wrote about all the happenings and the history, and it was deeply embedded. And the first thing when the colonists took over was they got rid of the harpers and they got rid of the bards, because that was like the media. So anyway, we're going straight to Yeats. We have 2 Nobel Prize winners. We're going to cover them, and the first one is Yeats. And here we go.
Thank you, Anya. The Stolen Child by W.B. Yeats. Let me try this. Where dips the rocky highland of Sleuthwood in the lake, there lies a leafy island where flapping herons wake, the drowsy water rats. There we've hid our fairy vats, full of berries and of the reddest stolen cherries. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's full of weeping, then you can understand. Where the wave of moonlight glosses the dim gray sands with light, far off by farthest Rosses we footed all the night, weaving olden dances, mingling hands and mingling glances till the moon has taken flight. To and fro we leap and chase the frothy bubbles, while the world is full of troubles and is anxious in its sleep. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with the fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the wandering water gushes from the hills from Glencar, in pools among the rushes that scarce could bathe a star, we seek for slumbering trout, and whispering in their ears give them unquiet dreams, leaning softly out from ferns that drop their tears over the young streams. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Away with us he's going, the solemn-eyed. He'll hear no more the lowing of the calves on the warm hillside, or the kettle on the hob sing peace into his breast, or see the brown mice bob round and round this oatmeal chest. For he comes, the human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, from a world more full of weeping than he can understand. Thank you.
So W.B. Yeats was sort of our most well-known and most well-quoted poet, and he won a Nobel Prize. He was part of the Great Revival, and he was very much nurtured by Lady Gregory, who brought along an awful lot of poets and playwrights, Sean O'Casey, J.M. Singh, Gogarty, and she was very much, Lady Gregory, involved in reviving the Abbey Theatre, which started off all the playwrights, and they form a direct line down to our modern playwrights and Hollywood actors that you see today. They would have all performed many of those plays. But one of the interesting things about Yeats, he could get very dark, like in his poem The Second Coming, where he talks about something slouching towards Bethlehem. And he talks about the center not being able to hold, which we often hear quoted, especially now. But he also loved to go to the land of sort of fairy. He was very tied into Irish mythology and loved it. And Lady Gregory was herself very much encouraged that and collected a lot of fairy tales and folklore. So I'm going to play a tune, which our friend Lee loved. And she helped me collect so many, right in this library, she helped me collect so many fairy tales and folk tales and gave me a huge bibliography. But Yeats was into that. He covered the spectrum, as all great poets and artists do. He would go so deep, but then he could go so much towards the light. Anyway, this is King of the Fairies.
I'd like to bring Judy Fosdick up to the podium. She is a trustee of many years here at the Plymouth Public Library, and she is in the forefront of the renovation of the Dr. Richard M. Schiff Garden. So, welcome, Judy.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is a great pleasure to be here listening to this beautiful music, and I'm learning a little bit about Irish poetry, which I didn't know. I'm going to read a poem by Amergin, who lived 500 BC, from the Irish mythology. The poem is from Amergin's Incantation to Ireland, with origins perhaps 500 years before Christ. In the poem, Amergin, a Milesian warrior, as well as poet and Ireland's first druid, takes on the spirit of Ireland and speaks of its soul. Originating in northwest Spain's Galicia, the Milesians are the ancestors of the Gaels, who conquered the country and became the dominant tribe, retaining political power at Tara until the arrival of the Anglo-Normans. Here's the poem, Amergin's Mystery. I am the wind which breathes upon the sea. I'm the wave of the ocean. I am the murmur of the billows. I am the ox of the 7 combats. I am the vulture upon the rocks. I'm the beam of the sun. I am the fairest of plants. I am the wild boar in valor. I am a salmon in the water. I am a lake in the plain. I am a word of science. I am the point of the lance of battle. I am the God who created in the head the fire. Who is it who throws light into the meeting on the mountain? Who announces the ages of the moon? Who teaches the place where couches the sun, if not I?
I have to smile. This is just so wonderful, isn't it? Next, I would like to bring up Ann Phelan, who is the CEO of the Plymouth Public Library Foundation. She and I go back many years, and we had a lot of fun putting on wonderful programs just like this. So welcome.
Thanks. Thank you. And I want to echo what Jennifer just said. I think this is truly magical at this combination of Anya and the harp and the poetry. It's like something I've never experienced. So I'm delighted to be here doing this. I have the pleasure of reading Song of the Wandering Aengus by Yeats. And this was first published in 1899. And the poem tells the story of Aengus, the Irish god of love, who falls in love with a banshee in a dream. He then spends his life searching for her. And I'm going to turn it over to Anya now.
So what makes Yeats's poetry so rich in many ways is the way he alludes to so many aspects of Irish mythology and folklore. So he talks about going out in the, he talks about the hazelwood. I went out in the hazelwood because a fire was in my head, which I love. But the hazel was, you know, when people would go out divining for water, they'd use a hazel wand, and hazel is sort of the wood of divination. And then he mentions the apples, the silver apples, and the apples in mythology. The apple was always, and the apple tree was always the gateway to divination and to the other world. And O'Carolan, who's a composer I'll follow up with, one of his first songs, he falls asleep under an apple tree and finds himself in the other world. And you'll notice that a lot of these stories of mythology, the gateway to the other world is always the apple tree. And you'll hear him mention the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun. And the moon always refers to the feminine. you know, the feminine aspect, the sun is always the linear male. So all of Yeats's poetry is just layered up with layers and layers of Celtic mythology. So if you really want to understand his poetry, you have to read some of the mythology and the folklore. Back to you, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Song of the Wandering Angus. I went out to the hazelwood because a fire was in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand and hooked a berry to a thread. And when white moths were on the wing and moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream and caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire aflame, but something rustled on the floor and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossom in her hair who called me by my name and ran, faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone and kiss her lips and take her hands and walk among long dappled grass and pluck till time and times are done the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun.
So one of the other things about that poem is it sort of follows in what we call the Aisling tradition. So remember I mentioned the bards to you, and some of these bards used to really write in very strict meter and times, and because they were poets, and it was often said that over the centuries the bards got too concerned with form and less concerned with creativity. But one of the types of poems they did was the Aisling, which means dream. And what would happen is they would fall asleep, and in their dream they would meet this beautiful woman. And so in the poem they would describe in great depth and detail the beauty of this woman, you know, her hair and her skin and whatever. And so to a degree, in that poem, Yeats is continuing on the Aisling tradition. And this little tune of mine is called Aisling, and it's my own sort of tone poem to the Aisling tradition. And I never usually tell people that, but now ye know. Another great writer or great poet was the poet Pádraig Kavanagh. And I chose this poem because it speaks to the courage to love. And in an age where it's kind of difficult to love and take a chance on love and even like, I thought this poem was wonderful. And it's called On on Raglan Road. And one of the really difficult things to do with poetry is to put it to music. And I called Mary Oliver once, and she said, "You don't want to put it to music, do you?" And I said, no, I just want people to read the poetry. I want to put it in the liner notes. So she actually gave me permission to do that with some of her poetry. And it was for an album on death. And we both figured it would never make money, so what the hell, you know? Anyway, this is... there's a great story behind it. I'm slightly worried about time, but Patrick Kavanagh fell in love with this woman who was 18 years his junior. He was well into alcoholism by that stage himself. She was a medical student, and he knew there was no hope for this love. And he said, "But I said, let grief be a falling leaf at the dawning of the day. On Raglan Road, on an autumn day, I saw her first and knew that her dark hair might weave a snare that I might one day rue. I saw the danger, yet I walked along the enchanted way, and I said, let grief be a falling leaf at the dawning of the day." And he told her, he said, "I will immortalize you." And he did, because Van Morrison has recorded it, Joan Osborne has recorded it, Ed Sheeran has now recorded it. And as I mentioned, it's really difficult to put poetry to music. But on the other hand, you can take very trite things and put them to music and they sound wonderful. It's a kind of a weird thing. But somewhere in Pádraig Kavanagh's mind, Patrick, or Pádraig as we often call him, he had this old Irish air that every school child learns at the age of 4 on the tin whistle, and I learnt it myself. And he had it in the back of his head, and he told it to Luke Kelly of one of the Dubliners. And somewhere he had that meter, and his own genius was that this actual brilliant poem works beautifully. And I'll do one verse of it for you, just so you can hear it. And it's sung all the time, and it works. Street where old ghosts meet, I see her walking now, away from me so hurriedly, my reason must allow that I have loved not as I should, a creature made of clay. Oh, the angel woos, the clay he'll lose, his wings at the dawn of day.
Okay, so now we're ready to be more contemporary. I will tell you that there is Kleenex available if you need it from. This has been very moving. Thank you, Anya. It is my good fortune and my happiness to be able to talk about the America's Hometown Laureate for just a brief moment, and then I will introduce our new Poet Laureate. But I don't know how many of you folks were around in 2020 when the library hosted our finalist reading for the first Plymouth Poet Laureate, of which Miriam was a part of that event. We had over 100 people in this room that night. It was near the end of February, and shortly thereafter, we had to close our doors to the public for COVID. So things moved along as far as the Poet Laureate was appointed. It was Stephen Delbos, and he went off on his own while we all went off on our ways and hid in our corners. And then a couple years go by, and I came, as I said, I was retired, and I ran into Stephen Cole, who is works for the Plymouth Foundation, Development Foundation. And he's the one who brought the idea to us to create a Plymouth Poet Laureate. He's quite a wise man and has a great sense of humor. So we got connected and said, so what's going to happen next? We're into like the second year of the term, we've got to do something. So we pulled together, we ended up making it a nonprofit organization with, we're up to 7 directors are on the committee, on the board. And we began our work to do some more poetry events and to bring forth the next Poet Laureate. And Stephen Delbos, he said, I never knew whether there would be a second one. And so it meant more to him to hand over the torch to our new Poet Laureate, Miriam O'Neill, who's just been wonderful. So please come up.
Wow. Now I really have to perform. It has been wonderful to inherit from Stephen Delbos this position, and I'm so happy to be part of the group that's bringing poetry to the greater Plymouth area. Many of you know about Poetry, the Art of Words, which is my baby now. And so happy to expand it and bring in more people and make the community larger. So I came into the list, I received the list from Jennifer, and I said, I want some women. Could I have some women Irish poets in the list? Given that we had a great tradition of these poets included. So I'd like to read 2 poems for you from contemporary Irish poets, women poets. Paula Meehan just won yet another prize. She's published by Daedalus Books in Ireland, and she's from the north of Dublin. She's like the Dublin of Dublin. If you've ever seen the movie The Commitments, you know what I'm talking about when they say, and the north of Dublin. So, and I apologize if I seem to slip. It's my grandmother in me. If I slip into a little bit of the tongue, it's my grandmother. But what I love about Paula in particular is that she also incorporates poets from around the world into her poetry, and this one is near and dear to my heart because it takes the old schoolmaster and the new poetry, and you find out what happens when those 2 things meet. It's called Swallows and Willows. When he caught me at the corner with a curly-headed, green-eyed boy, he brought me into detention. Write out, let me see, a verse of a poem, any verse of your choice, but longer than a quatrain, 5 lines at least, 100 times. From the jailer, underlined 3 times, by Sylvia Plath. I imagine him impotent as distant thunder, in whose shadow I have eaten my ghost ration. I wish him dead and away. That, it seems, is the impossibility. I was neat at first, maybe neat to the 10th time, then a looping downward scrawl. Out the window, swallows and willows and sun on the river. I meant a verse from a set text. I sat at the edge of his class, right into summer exams, sulky and lonely and cruel. And then we have Evan Boland. And something I've learned recently about her and her life is that she spent a lot of time in the U.S. teaching at various colleges, and but she also spent a lot of her life away from home once her mom died. But what I found out about her mom was that she, when the father was an ambassador and he was in New York, they were living in New York, Mom started an organization to raise up modern Irish art, and raised $5 million back in the 50s to bring modern Irish art to the US. It's pretty amazing for the 50s. The immigrant Irish. Like oil lamps, we put them out the back of our houses, of our minds. We had lights better than, newer than, and then a time came, this time, and now we need them. Their dread makeshift example. They would have thrived on our necessities. What they survived, we could not even live. By their lights, now it is time to imagine how they stood there, what they stood with, that their possessions may become our power. Cardboard, iron, their hardships parceled in them, patience, fortitude, long suffering in the bruise-colored dusk of the new world, and all the old songs, and nothing to lose. Thank you.
was the name of that song?
Skyward Song.
What?
Skyward Song.
Sky?
It's the theme song from Outlander.
That's what, yeah. Theme song from Outlander. Yeah. So next I would like to bring up to the podium Sheila Mullen-Twyman, who is a participant in the writing community called Poetry, the Art of Words that Miriam had introduced before. And she has her own Seamus Heaney story to tell. Please come up.
I'm going to read a poem by Seamus. I love the name Seamus. I just like saying it, Seamus Heaney. And I had the pleasure of meeting him back in the 1950s when I was at Boston College. He came and spoke a few times and contributed a lot of his correspondence and manuscripts to the library at the college. I'm going to read The Death of a Naturalist. And I have to say, it talks about flax. Flax was a very, or is a very important ingredient for linen, and there was a big industry back then. I'm not sure if that's true now, is it? No. Okay, this is Seamus Heaney. The Death of a Naturalist. All year the flax dam festered in the heart of the townland. Green and heavy-headed, flax had rotted there, weighted down by huge sods. Daily it sweltered in the punishing sun. Bubbles gurgled delicately. Blue bottles wove a strong gauze of sound around the smell. There were dragonflies, spotted butterflies, but best of all was the warm, thick slobber of frog spawn that grew like clotted water in the shade of the banks. Here, every spring, I would fill jam pots full of the jellied specks to range on windowsills at home, on shelves at school, and wait and watch until the fattening dots burst into nimble swimming tadpoles. Miss Wallace would tell us how the daddy frog was called a bullfrog, and how he croaked, and how Mammy Frog laid hundreds of little eggs, and this was frog spawn. You could tell the weather by the frogs, too, for they were yellow in the sun and brown in the rain. Then, one hot day, when the fields were rank with cow dung in the grass, the angry frogs invaded the flax dam. I ducked through hedges to a coarse croaking that I had not heard before. The air was thick with a bass chorus. Right down the dam, gross-bellied frogs were cocked on sods. Their loose necks pulsed like sails. Some hopped. The slap and plop were obscene threats. Some sat poised like mud grenades. The bloodheads farting, I sickened, turned, and ran. The great slime kings were gathered there for vengeance. I knew that if I dipped my hands into the spawn would clutch it. Thank you.
I'm going to stay, while we're on Seamus Heaney, we may as well stay with him. He is a Nobel Prize winner, no small thing, and we had the greatest number of Nobel Prize winners for writing per capita, but the population of Iceland is 300 and something thousand, or no, 335,000. So when they won one, it really skewed the numbers for everybody. But we do seem to have an inordinate number of Nobel Prize winners in writing. And I blame the rainy weather. Anyway, I think the respect for poetry is very ingrained, and even after Ireland was colonised, that love of poetry seemed to remain. And a lot of the women definitely were in the background for many centuries, but that doesn't mean they didn't really back it up. And my dear friend Rosie Keane has a group called Wild Irish Women, WILDE, which is dedicated very much to Oscar Wilde's mother, Esperanza, and really shows the impact women had on Irish literature and the arts, and how much they were in the background, but at the forefront. Yeats's sisters really helped him out financially, and he could never have done what he did without them. And they were a powerhouse in terms of really being the silent heroes in terms of the Irish arts. But that love of poetry is very much in existence in Ireland, and her most recent play, it's called The Celtification of Emily Dickinson. It speaks to the fact that her Irish maid, Margaret Maher, defied her wishes to burn her poetry after her death, which was a big deal for a woman with almost no education to say, no, I won't do what my boss told me to do. And Margaret Maher had no education really, except for the hedge school master, and she still defied her boss and kept the poetry because she understood the value of it, and she really saved a lot of Emily Dickinson's poetry. And she was just a lowly maid from County Tipperary. Thank you very much. Anyway, we'll continue on with Seamus Heaney's poetry. This is my favourite Seamus Heaney poem, and it's also not just the favourite of most Irish people, but the favourite poem of all Irish people in the last 100 years. And it's called When All the Others Were Away at Mass. And if you're from a large family, you'll really understand this. When all the others were away at Mass, I was all hers as we peeled potatoes. It's dedicated to his mother. When all the others were away at Mass, I was all hers as we peeled potatoes. They broke the silence, let fall one by one like solder weeping off the soldering iron. Cold comfort sat between us, things to share gleaming in the bucket of clean water, and again let fall like pleasant splashes from each other's work would bring us to our senses. So while the parish priest at her bedside went hammer and tongs at the prayers for the dying, and some were responding and some crying, I remember her head bent toward my head, her breath in mine, our fluent dipping knives, never closer the whole rest of our lives. And I went to see Seamus when he was down in Harvard. I was very, very young and stupid. And I was putting music to Sweeney Astray, one of his great things, and clueless. And he was so avuncular and kind. He was unbelievable, and a great champion, a great champion of women poets, very much like the Emily Dickinson types, who probably won't be known until after they're dead, because many of them are eccentric. No wonder I went to see him. But anyway, this is another few bars for you. So we're winding towards the close of our formal program, and we probably have time for a little Q&A at the end. And I'm finishing up with a poem by a man I had the great privilege of working with at the beginning and towards the end of his career, and his name was John O'Donoghue. And he wrote an awful lot of spiritual poetry in the Celtic spirituality tradition. He was a great poet and philosopher, and he's dead about 12 years now. And this is his most popular poem, and it's called Bannacht, which means blessing. And I opened with a Celtic blessing, and I'll close with a Celtic blessing. And he wrote a book of Celtic blessings called To Bless the Space Between Us. And there's every blessing imaginable in it. And some of the great writings out of Ireland were sort of monastic blessings that sort of start "May you," and very much tied into the Gaelic or the Irish in the monastic tradition. And many of those poems that he has in that book, which is called Bannacht, when it was published in Irish or in Ireland, are very much in that tradition. So this is his poem Bannacht, and sort of as a carry-on from Heaney, he dedicated this to his mother, and I think he knew it would be very popular, and it certainly was. It's called Bannacht Blessings. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the grey window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colours, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the currach of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. So if you have any questions for me or for anybody, any of our leaders or for Jennifer, please work away. Yes.
How long have you been playing the harp, and why was the harp the instrument that you chose?
Oh, I've been playing the harp since as long as I can remember, and I chose it probably because my sisters before me, we'd gone to a school in a neighbouring county, and they chose it, and I really liked it, so yes.
You had mentioned that there were 3 people in the aristocracy's court, the harper, the bard, and could you elucidate on that 3rd person and what he did? What was the job?
So if you'd look up Brehon law, Brehon, there was an actual sort of form of law that existed way back in Irish society, and they also would have trained for 7 years, but it was tied to the law. And so these were very trades that you apprenticed basically for 7 years, and so it wasn't something it wasn't really a folk thing. The harp, the role of the harper and the bard / poet and the Breton lawyer, if you will, they were very serious trades for the aristocracy. But it was Breton, yeah, that's what it was. So, yes, ma'am.
Do you write a lot of your own music?
Pardon me?
Do you play a lot of your own music?
I do, yeah. That last tune I wrote, and I sprinkled them in, and sometimes I forget to mention what's what, I do have some for sale. Thank you, Jennifer. And you can follow me on Spotify and all of those streaming services and all of that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Kind of a technical question. I noticed, I don't know much about the harp, but I noticed you were changing some levers. What is that?
Yes, and that's the correct term for them. They're called levers. And what they do is, I don't have black notes because my scale is... So if I want to get the black notes, the sharps and flats, I have to put up and down these levers. So that's what they do. So when a lever is down, it's a perfect half tone when I put it up. So that's how I do that on this instrument. So thank you for that question, because I know everyone wanted to ask that. Now you know. Yes.
Who made your harp? What shows where they're expert harp makers?
The last part I didn't quite catch, I'm sorry.
Who made your harp?
Who made my harp? A man called Stephen Green, who's passed away now. He was from West Virginia. And when I started playing, there were very few harp makers, and now there are several. The Japanese were making great harps about 30 years ago, and now there's tons of great harp makers, especially in the US, actually. But yes, this gentleman was from West Virginia. It's excellent. It's a very complex combination of being a really good woodworker and a really good engineer, because there's about 100 tons of pressure with the strings. And they don't appreciate, never buy a harp as an investment, because eventually it's going to blow up from the pressure, or it's going to pull apart. Yeah, not a good investment. Yes, ma'am.
Does it matter what type of wood you use?
It's It does, but it's often a matter of choice and taste. It's a little like cars. It's taste, yeah. This one is maple, if I'm not mistaken. So, and some people like lighter weight for, because of their ergonomic situation, so different strokes. Yeah. That's it, yes.
I have a question about strength of your shoulder and your hands. Do you need to do exercises to be able to play the harp?
Exercise and now I are not really on a first name basis.
So you don't feel like there's pressure in certain parts of you that...
No, I run around a lot and I carry it and everything. But it's about 27 pounds. It's hollow in the middle, so it's not too bad at all. And I have a wheeler and all of that stuff.
And
So.
may I ask who taught you?
Yes, Sister Eileen Walsh at the Mercy Convent in Tuam. She was an amazing teacher and she taught my sisters as well. Yeah, she's an amazing lady.
You have transported us all.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. So we have to thank Miss Jennifer because you can't imagine how much organization it took to organize all of these folks. So thank you.
I'm going to conclude and just thank you all for having come today and shared in this very special day, I think for all of us in different ways. Please take a minute to sign up if you're not on my email list at the back of the room on the table. There's also my business card with my cell phone and my email. So if you want to contact me directly, I do. We have a lot going on in the future. And just to remind you that next Tuesday is part 3 of our Poetry Festival at Uva Wine Bar at 6 p.m., 6 to 8. We have readers, but if you would like to read, you can email me. And I have noticed that poets like to drink a little wine while they're, to loosen up the words a little bit. And then the final event is next Thursday at Inky Hands Print Studio, and we're going to have an ekphrastic poetry event. So, and that's at 2 o'clock. So I think we're cooking. I do. Thank you, Anya.